Debate. We'll begin with our friend Chris Matthews, who is live from Simi Valley. Chris, what's the headline for you here tonight?
Well, you know, I thought about halfway through it, Rachel, that it was and it may still be the Ponzi scheme reference you pointed out. The fact that Governor Perry backed up an earlier charge on his list of attacks on the establishment, the fact that he did so strongly, calling Social Security a Ponzi scheme, using other words about, I think that's the lead in the New York Times tomorrow, I would bet. I think he's no doubt the leader of the discussion tomorrow morning. He will be the lightning rod for the Pelosi wing of the Democratic Party, the core liberals. They'll go after him on this because it's an easy one. It's about constituency politics. They'll simply defend Social Security. It's basically 101 politics. And I think the more dangerous thing he said, and the thing that I am concerned about, because it's not tonal, it's real, this man's absolute opposition to scientific information. The thought that this country would elect or can seriously consider electing someone who stands out there and says, I don't accept science on climate change, and clearly doesn't want to study it any further. I think that's the big, hard, bad news for the Republican Party. Their front runner seemed to be tonight anti-science, and this country has to win the battle of science in the world against China and India and the other BRIC countries. If we give up on science, if we get the image of being a Yahoo country, a monkey business country, we got a real problem in terms of our national identity. And this fellow we're looking at right now is leading the charge, the Luddite charge against modern technology and modern information. So I think that's the hard, bad news tonight for the Republican Party.
Chris Matthews joining us from Simi Valley. Chris, will be back with you in just a moment. I want to bring in Republican strategist Steve Schmidt, who, of course, ran the McCain-Palin presidential campaign in 2008. Steve, thank you very much for being with us tonight. We feel lucky to have you. Let me ask you the broad question tonight about the big headline out of the debate and how other candidates coped tonight with the rise of Rick Perry into an apparent frontrunner.
Well, look, I thought you saw all of the Republican candidates tonight trying to focus as best they can on the economy, and I think this is going to be the major issue in the general election against President Obama. And I thought that Mitt Romney did a very good job tonight. I thought he was poised. You could tell he's been through a lot of these debates. He made no mistakes. He was fluent on the economy. I think that Rick Perry, for his first debate, I think he did a decent job up front talking about the economy, talking about jobs, talking about his Texas record. But as the debate moved into areas, climate change, moved into immigration, moved into health care, moved into national security issues, he stumbled a bit. And I also think when you look at some of the rhetoric that he uses, talking about the size of the government, he's going to cut the head off the snake, calling the president a liar, the Ponzi scheme rhetoric, all of these things may not necessarily have a negative reaction in a Republican primary, but all of that is very problematic in the context of a general election when you're trying to win in swing states and trying to win back states like North Carolina, for example. So I thought he had some rough parts in it. I thought Governor Romney looked very well and very good in the debate. And I think as this campaign progresses, you're going to see an increasing focus between the two of them. And I think it's going to be a very robust competition between the two of them as we move forward.
Steve, as you said, Governor Perry made no major mistakes tonight. That's probably the single most important thing that he needed to do. Are you seeing signs of a concrete shift in strategy by any of the other candidates to respond to his presence in the race? Is anybody doing anything differently now in order to account for him?
I think at the end of the day, the calendar drives part of the strategy, because even though Rick Perry has surged to the front of the race, he doesn't change this dynamic. The fact was that Mitt Romney wasn't competing in Iowa and is unlikely to be the victor in Iowa. And Perry's entrance to the race, while he's dislodged Romney from the top of the national polls, has not dislodged Romney in New Hampshire. So if Rick Perry proceeds and everything were to play out on that timeline, Rick Perry were to proceed to win the Iowa caucuses, Mitt Romney wins New Hampshire, you have a two-person race going forward going into South Carolina. I think it's clear clear when you watch the race tonight that this is ultimately going to be a contest that, you know, devolves down between Mitt Romney and Governor Perry. And, you know, obviously John Huntsman is communicating today to an audience in New Hampshire, hoping that if there's a political murder-suicide between Romney and Perry, that it gets very negative in New Hampshire. He may have some room to move with an electorate that's comprised of independents. And, you know, and I thought the other big headline of the debate tonight is, you know, I think the Michele Bachmann, you know, adventure in the Republican primary is coming to an end. You just see Rick Perry has totally taken the wind out of her sails. I think for a lot of the spring, you saw a dynamic where the field as it was constituted was driving demand for other candidates. And I think that Rick Perry has sated that demand. And I think that you have a Republican field now. I think that Republican voters are going to be somewhat satisfied with, or at least, you know, not have that clamoring you've seen for much of the spring and summer for other candidates to get in the race.
Steve Schmidt, who managed the McCain-Palin campaign in 2008. Steve, thank you. We'll be talking to you again shortly. I appreciate it. Let's bring in now Lawrence O'Donnell, the host of The Last Word, Al Sharpton, host of Politics Nation, the host of The Ed Show, Ed Schultz, and Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist for The Washington Post, Eugene Robinson, who, of course, is also an MSNBC political analyst. All four join me here in New York. Gentlemen, simple question. Who helped their campaign the most tonight, and who hurt their campaign the most, in brief? Ed, let me start with you.
Well, I think Governor Perry did exactly what his supporters wanted him to do. He didn't back down. He was aggressive on Mitt Romney on jobs. He was aggressive on his positions on Social Security. He actually said that Karl Rove was over the top. Now, have any of us ever heard a Republican say that Karl Rove was over the top? And he also countered the position of the former vice president. I mean, this guy is solid in his philosophy, and that's the draw when it comes to the hard right wing. And with the money he's got, he's going to be tough to beat.
In terms of who did themselves the most harm tonight, what do you think?
Well, I don't think Michele Bachmann was anywhere near as smooth as she was in past debates. So I think that Steve Schmidt's analysis of that is true. I thought Newt Gingrich took it up a notch tonight, and I thought Mr. Huntsman also had his best performance tonight. He seemed like more of a moderator than anything else, but a very affable man, certainly up on his facts, and I thought that he was very presentable tonight.
And you are in a generous spirit about this tonight. It's good to hear it. It's good to hear it.
Well, it is a Republican debate.
Which is always fun. Reverend Al.
I think that I agree Governor Perry fed red meat to his base. I think that he hurt himself, though, with the general public. When you go through the fact checks, when they check out his claims about jobs and minimum wage in Texas, I think he's going to get a little hit hard on that. The Ponzi scheme, science. I mean, this whole thing of Galileo was outvoted. I mean, he really got out there. But for his followers, I think he played to those seats. Whether they are the majority of the seats or not, we'll see. I don't think Romney made any major mistakes. I was surprised that Romney was not more rattled and deflated as I thought he would be. He did not seem intimidated by Perry, and I thought he may be. I think Bachmann left the race tonight. I think she was totally considered second tier, came off that way. I think Gingrich did a better performance. The big loser tonight was Ronald Reagan, though. I mean, they were in his place. Reagan, who raised taxes over and over again and tripled the deficit. He couldn't have won this nomination with that crew up there. So I think Ronald Reagan looked like the Democrat in the room. And I think the DNC should take the Social Security line of Mr. Perry and the attack on Social Security and the Ponzi scheme and put out bumper stickers saying it's not about Obama, it's about your mama, and we'll win.
Lawrence O'Donnell.
Al's point is very important. I think the real headline tonight is Romney lives because Perry failed. Perry came into this campaign and steamrolled everyone in the polls. He did not steamroll Romney tonight. They can use Ronald Reagan against Rick Perry, and they can use him on everything, including the Social Security bit. This Ponzi thing that he got himself in a deeper hole on tonight, he said in the Ronald Reagan Library. 1983, Ronald Reagan. Today, we reaffirm Franklin Roosevelt's commitment that Social Security must always provide a secure and stable base so that older Americans may live in dignity. Ronald Reagan would have been the wild lefty in the room, getting less than 1% of the polling vote in this crowd, with Huntsman polling above him.
Who did themselves the most harm tonight?
Rick Perry did himself the most harm because he had to come in here and perform according to his polls as a very strong front runner. He could have created a bigger distance between him and Romney tonight. He failed to do that. Romney, much more debate experience, performed better than any of the rest of them, and I think helped remind Republicans, don't rush to Perry.
So Perry loses on the opportunity cost because he could have nailed it down tonight. Gene.
Romney clearly did himself the most good, as far as I'm concerned. I think Romney managed to take very solid conservative positions, but he also managed to separate himself from Perry on Social Security, which
committed
is
to saving Social Security.
Exactly.
A guy actually said that in the Republican debate.
And talked about the value that Social Security has and how you can't call it a Ponzi scheme. I mean, I thought that was excellent for Romney.
Romney knows Florida is coming.
Exactly. Exactly. They got to go through Florida. You know, in terms of who hurt themselves the most, I got to go with Bachmann. I mean, she really did drop down out of the first tier into the second tier in this debate. She kind of faded away into the background, and we're not talking about what she said. You know, when's the last time there was a debate we weren't talking about what Michele Bachmann said?
Let me take one moment, and we'll go to you, Ed, right when we come back. But I got to tell you that this is MSNBC's continuing coverage of tonight's Republican debate, and I need to ask you to stay with us. Good evening. I'm Rachel Maddow. It is just after 10 p.m. here on the East Coast and 7 p.m. on the West Coast, where the NBC News and Politico Republican presidential debate has just ended at the Reagan Library in Simi Valley, California. This was the fourth Republican debate of this campaign season and the first to include Rick Perry, who polls say is the field's current frontrunner. Governor Perry joined 7 other candidates on stage tonight: Mitt Romney, Michele Bachmann, Herman, Cain, Ron Paul, John Huntsman, Newt Gingrich, and Rick Santorum. Not on stage tonight, many other declared candidates, including Gary Johnson, Buddy Roemer, Fred Karger, Thaddeus McCotter, and the candidate who nobody knows whether or not she's a candidate, Sarah Palin. Hardball's Chris Matthews is in Simi Valley. Ed Schultz, Lawrence O'Donnell, Al Sharpton, and Gene Robinson are here with me on set in New York. We will have Steve Schmidt, Robert Gibbs, Michael Steele, Melissa Harris Perry, Howard Feineman, Alex Wagner, and many more weighing in. Let's listen to what was perhaps the most contentious moment in tonight's debate about Social Security.
It is a Ponzi scheme to tell our kids that are 25 or 30 years old today, you're paying into a program that's going to be there. Anybody that's for the status quo with Social Security today is involved with a monstrous lie to our kids, and it's not right.
Our nominee has to be someone who isn't committed to abolishing Social Security, but who's committed to saving Social Security. We have always had at the heart of our party a recognition that we want to care for those in need, and our seniors have the need of Social Security.
You cannot keep the status quo in place and not call it anything other than a Ponzi scheme. It is. That is what it is. Americans know that, and regardless of what anyone says, oh, it's not, and that's provocative language, maybe it's time to have some provocative language in this country.
Rick Perry making perhaps the line of the night, but not a new point for him to make. Rick Perry, of course, was asked about calling Social Security a Ponzi scheme because that's what's in his book. If he was trying to take that back right now, we would be calling that a great gaffe. Mitt Romney taking a rather bold move tonight. I wouldn't say he did it artfully, but he certainly did it aggressively to make that the main issue of Rick Perry's candidacy. I think makes Mitt Romney mostly the winner tonight. I would say the big loser tonight was John Huntsman, mostly because because this was Huntsman's opportunity to be seen as something other than a second-tier or even third-tier candidate, and I don't think he moved at all. I do think that he and Michele Bachmann are now consigned to the bleachers, while Romney and Perry seem to be sitting in the box seats. But I want to bring in Ed Schultz here.
Well, I think Perry hit it out of the park on Social Security with his base. Look, Wall Street wants to privatize Social Security. They don't want to save Social Security. Wall Street wants all that money going right down the street, and they want the American people being held to that stock price. And I believe that one of the reasons why he talked about young people and kids, he's selling the next generation, that what we did for the last 70 years isn't where we have to go for the next 70 years. And that's what corporations want to hear. That's exactly what Wall Street wants to hear, and that's what his base wants to hear. He talked about the status quo. He says we're lying to our kids. But most of all, he didn't back down. And in the liberal left in this country, this is where President Obama has had some trouble. A lot of people think that he has backed down when he didn't need to. We saw somebody tonight in the heat of the battle, first time out, he was